It's saying that I'm live. Am I live, guys? Let me know if you are here. I'm going to wait another minute or two for people in the group to come in. I am so excited about today's interview. You know, I met Debra. It happens that our birthday is about a week apart. So somebody's here. Say hello. Show me who you are. So our birthdays, Debra and I were both Virgo, and our birthdays are about a week apart. And she lives in South Florida. It was so fantastic for us to get together and have lunch, talk about projects and ideas and creative outlets and what each one of us is doing. And I don't get that. So, you know, it's so all of the speakers are from all over the country. So this was really a treat. I'm starting to see that there is people. Say hi, guys. I need you to say hello. I hope that you all approved the StreamYard. Kathy is here. Thank you, Kathy. Kathy is one of my Kintsugi ladies. She's going to be on a show very soon. I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the event today. Right now, I am going to bring you Debra Kay to the studio, and she will introduce herself much better than I could do service. Okay, hold on a second. What is this? I got a message. Okay, Melissa is here too. And here is Debra. Hi, Debra.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
I am great. I am so happy. Okay, hold on a second. There is a Facebook user. Guys, when you don't approve StreamYard, this is what I see. And I don't know who you are.
Hi. Whoever you are, Facebook user, hi.
You really want to know who you are. Salud is here. Naomi is here. Yeah. Melissa is here. Yes, Melissa, it worked. Melissa followed my directions and it worked. Kathy. So, you know, thank you so much all for being here. We are in for such a treat. As I was saying before, Debra came in. We met in person. Debra is a TV producer of Well World TV. At the end, actually, Debra, you can share a little bit about what you're doing with Well World. I'm sure people will be excited to hear about what you're doing. I think that the people in our group are perfect target audience for your TV. But right now, we are talking about From Ashes to an Emmy nomination. Debra's life was impacted by suicide. She's going to speak openly. Anybody who has questions, if anybody has anonymous questions, you can ask, just write anonymous before, and then I will not post your comment. As far as questions, I would appreciate greatly if you hold on to your questions till the end of the show, so then I don't have to scroll and look for them. But if you're afraid you're gonna forget your question, then all you need to do is write question before your comment. And then when I'm searching through the comments, it will be easier for me to find the question. Salud is saying hi, Debra. Salud is an amazing member of our group. Okay, Debra, please introduce yourself and start from the beginning.
All right. Well, I think you already did a great job. Thank you so much for that. And I honor and respect being here. It's a pleasure to be here. So long story short, I am a person who is very driven by purpose and passion. I believe that the world needs educational and inspirational content, and that is the reason why I founded Well World TV, was so that we could distribute content in a bigger way and really reach the masses. As far as the story and what we're, you know, obviously this is could be a somber topic and is obviously a very painful and traumatic topic, but what I'm here to do is offer, you know, bits and pieces of my journey with suicide and hopefully offer some peace and hope for people that might be dealing with suicide. So do you want me just dig in and just start?
Dig in.
Okay.
Go back. Take us back with you.
Take us back. Okay, so we're gonna go back many years, and I can remember being a really young, small girl And for some reason, as I started to get older and I began to understand death and the concept of death, I held a perception in my mind that when I became an adult, I would commit suicide. I had no idea where this idea came from, but I almost believed, and this was, remember, I was just a small child, that that's what adults did. So when you grew up, somehow, some way, you became an adult, and then at some point you would just commit suicide. And I held this belief as a child for such a long time. And then as I began to grow up and enter into adulthood, I realized that that was a faulty belief. But I didn't know why would a child hold that belief? I had no idea. And so I think I was in my early to mid 30s. And I remember I was sitting down having a conversation with my mom, and she said something about when my grandmother had attempted suicide. And I remember feeling like shocked, because this was my favorite grandma. This was Grandma Marge. Like, she would come, she was like one of the best parts of my childhood. And I can remember, waiting at the door, waiting for her old 1970 something Oldsmobile to drive up and carry me off for the weekend. So I felt almost like a punch in the stomach. Like, what do you mean, grandma tried to commit suicide? And so then the story came out. And the story was that when I was very small, and I had a brother and a sister, so my brother was a little older, my sister was only 10 months younger than me. And so there had been a period of time where my grandmother had suffered from some significant amounts of depression. And so what she would do is she would make an attempt on her life. And she did different methods. So apparently she would take pills, or she would try to scratch and cut her wrists. Then she would call my parents. And so unbeknownst to me, I have no conscious memory of that. They would pack all of us kids into the station wagon, and then we would drive over to save grandma. And I can only imagine the conversation that was happening, in the front seat with us kids kind of, patted in the back seat. And this is a good message for us too, that little kids pick up on things. They pick up on so much that you may not be aware of. And so this happened over and over and over again. And I think it was a cry for attention. I think it was definitely a cry for help. But it was impacting the entire family circle. And my father actually had to sit down with my grandmother at some point and just say, we can't do it anymore. Like, we can't do this anymore. You have to get help, because I'm not going to be able to continue to throw my family in a vehicle and drive across town to try to save you. And I can only imagine, the emotional impact that this was having on him, because that's his mother that he's, attempting to save every time. But what it did for me is it at least, having that information from my mom brought me clarity around why, as a child, I would hold that belief. And so there was a sense of peace that, I wasn't crazy or something. It's like, I wasn't nuts. It's like that was embedded in me at a young age, that suicide was part of our family, and that there had been some significant attempts around that.
Do you remember how old you were then?
I mean, I believe I was probably, it started when I was maybe 3, 4, 5 years old. So I was young enough that I don't have a conscious memory of being in that vehicle, but I was old enough to be able to understand the language that my parents were using, and the concept of somebody could take their own life. Absolutely.
Now tell me something. What happened to your grandmother after the conversation that your father had with her?
She actually stopped her attempts. So she had already passed when I found out this information. So I don't know what state of mind she was in, or if that was even the right decision or not the right decision. I think she was seeking help. And the way that she was seeking help was to activate my dad to come and save her time and time again. And so when he drew a boundary with her and said, I can't do this anymore, her attempts of suicide stopped. And literally, like I said, all my memories of my grandmother were very positive and happy. Like she would take us to the grocery store and we could buy all the junk food my parents wouldn't let us have. And we watched TV all weekend. She would take us swimming. She let us do her makeup. It's like all these fun memories I have of her. So I was actually shocked as an adult to learn that she had gone through such a state.
So at the end of the day, she passed away of natural causes.
She did. Yes. Yes. And I remember she was in a nursing home in Missouri, and I think her depression was a result. She had lost a young child. So I have an aunt that I never do, Patsy Ann, who died when she was 4 years old. And I think she never really got over that. And I remember when she was in the nursing home and I had gone to see her, and it was near the end of her life. And I remember just rubbing her hair and talking to her and just telling her that it's okay to go. It's okay. It's okay for you to go and be with Patsy Ann and, finally be able to be reunited, because I think on some level her heart was broken her whole life.
Mm-hmm. So take us from here. Many years then passed.
Yes.
So take us to the next vignette of your life.
Yeah. So suicide wasn't a thread, in my life in between that moment when I was in my 30s until 2016. And my father was, I think, a very aloof, kind of unemotional type like he didn't know how to love. And there's a lot of things around my father I've had to make peace with. And I've had a lot of visions, that have helped me understand my relationship with my father and the type, how he was the way he was. I think because he had lost his little sister and there was some abuse in his childhood, and then there was another little friend that he had lost, my father had a hard time being emotional and attaching to people. So as an adult, I can remember I was probably again in my mid-30s when I remember my dad telling me that he loved me for the first time. And I felt kind of shocked because I don't really ever remember him saying those words to me. And, we forged a pretty good connection. So we lived many states apart, but I would go visit him. He lived in the Arkansas, Missouri area. And I would make sure I made a trip to see him at least once or twice a year so that we could physically spend some time together. Now, as he got older, his health had deteriorated, and he was type 2 diabetic, and he was a double amputee. So he was in a wheelchair. I would have conversations. I was kind of like the strong person of the family. And so everybody would always come to me for, resolution for things. And so we would talk a lot about his long-term prognosis and his care. And he did not want to go to a nursing home. And so we got a caretaker that would come into his home and live with him that would take care of him. He had a wife that had died a few years before before he passed away. And it wasn't really supposed to happen that way. She was the one who was supposed to take care of him as he got older and, eventually had a peaceful passing. It didn't work that way. She had cancer and she passed away. And I think it was at that moment that his life ended. Even though he physically stayed with us a couple more years, I believe his life ended the second that she passed away. And he saw that his whole trajectory had shifted. And so
1 second. So at some point your parents divorced and he remarried.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, like literally they were the couple that stayed together for the children. And my sister and I were only 10 months apart. I had left for college. She was a senior in high school, and my mom filed for divorce. So they literally waited it out, which I don't know that that's the best decision either, because they weren't happy together. But they did it for the children. And he remarried very quickly. And he remarried somebody who was quite a bit younger, which is why we all thought, that she was going to take care of him as he aged, especially as his health began to deteriorate. So when she kind of unexpectedly passed, it changed everything. And I think mentally he was like, this isn't going to work for me. And so the day that I learned, that my father had taken his life, I was actually in Fort Lauderdale at a conference, and it was February 15th, 2016. And I turned my phone off for the first half of the day. And at my lunch break, I turned my phone on and saw that I had missed like 10 attempts to try to get in touch with me. And they were from people that I hadn't talked to in years. And so I was like, I knew immediately. And here's an interesting piece. Let me share this piece first. I was at a public speaking conference. And in the session right before lunch, we were doing some impromptu acting, and they said, we want you to invite somebody into the room and share them with your classmates. And I invited my father. And I told the story because I used to have this joke with my dad. He used to tell me all the time, Debra, God put a filter between your brain and your mouth for a reason. You'll always be wise to use it, because sometimes I don't use it. And so I was telling that story, and bringing him into the room and role playing and acting that out, which was so bizarre in hindsight. And because I didn't realize it at the time, he was already gone. He had already passed. I just didn't know it yet. And so when I called my step siblings back, I knew he was either gone or he was in the hospital, like something major had happened. And then that's when they told me that he had made the decision to take his life. And so I went into like almost like a shock sort of trauma state. And the person I was with at the time said, just leave your car in Fort Lauderdale. I'm coming to get you. He came and picked me up, and I came home and, started to deal with the aftermath of, when your parent takes their life.
Take us through that.
Yeah.
How I can't even begin to come to grips. I lost my father to natural causes almost a year ago. And there are days that my mother is upset with my father for leaving her, as he had a choice. So I can't even imagine when somebody actually makes that choice. There's so many. So take us there. So, because I really want the purpose of those interviews is I want us to know, to be able to be more sensitive and understanding of people that go through certain situations, aside from us learning how to deal if we ever come into contact with somebody who's struggling, who's going through the situations, but also how to be kind and how to feel properly for the person. If we don't talk about it, then we don't know. Like, what were your thoughts?
Well, there's you go through the gamut of every emotion. And one of the big emotion I think that survivors feel is a certain sense of guilt. Like, what could I have done differently? Should I have forced him to, make a decision to be in more care? Should I have moved him to Florida? Like, he would have resisted all of this stuff, but still, when you're left with somebody's decision like that, you try to work through every angle. Like, what could I have done differently that would have, maybe helped him make a different decision? And then it got even to the point where I didn't think he had taken his own life. I thought somebody had done harm to him. And because he used a gun. And so I thought maybe somebody had gotten in the house and they'd, staged it. And, I think that was just.
You can call it denial.
Yeah, denial. Like, I think, maybe there's something here going on, and I don't even, I'm in Florida, he's in Arkansas. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And some of the things that I'll share about how I've made personal peace with my father, some people may resonate with what I have to share, but this is, these are the ways that I made peace with things. And so I was on the phone with my sister all day long. We were back and forth. She was obviously upset. We were trying to figure out, like, what are we even supposed to do? Like, I don't even know. I was trying to call the police department. I was, trying to figure out, like, all of the steps. I was the executor. He didn't have a will. And so there was just all this chaos. And I can remember I fell asleep the first night, And that's when I was really deep in this kind of like, I think something happened to him. I don't think he made that decision. And I felt like my father visited me. And so I can remember being in my bed and sensing him next to me. And this could be a dream, I don't know. But I remember him very calmly and clearly stating to me, this was my choice. Nobody did this to me. I chose to do this. This was my choice. This was all on me. And so for whatever reason, I woke up the next day and I at least had a sense of peace that he had made that choice consciously and that nobody had, caused him harm or done damage, which brought, it still didn't help me with the decision that he made, but at least brought peace that, that was his choice. Mm-hmm. And so, so I can tell you in hindsight, 2016 was probably the worst year of my life, and it started in February with my father's decision to take his life and dealing with the emotions of that. But also just, trying to deal with his estate from a distance. He wasn't a wealthy man, and, just all of the chaos around that was so traumatic, that it had the potential to really sink me. And, I did. I think I gained 20 pounds that year. I'm pretty sure usually I just eat my way through whatever it is that I'm dealing with.
I know all about it. that part of your story, I can relate.
You can relate to that part. So, but there was some very specific things that happened in the ensuing years. Let me kind of wrap up 2016 because I think this is an important message for your audience to hear. It was at that time that in 2016, I had scheduled production for my second television show. And that show was called Senior Moments, and it was all kind of a little bit, odd that my father made this decision in his senior years. And here I was doing a TV show about, aging well and having spectacular moments in our senior years. And so I already had my production on the books, and I was supposed to travel to Rancho La Puerta in Tecate, Mexico, and interview the 95-year-old godmother of the spa industry and share her story. So she's almost like the opposite of, the life that kind of, the trajectory my father's life had been on. But I can tell you, I wanted to cancel that TV show. I was like, this is a horrible year. I'm dealing with all this stuff, but I had made commitments at Rancho La Puerta, at the Mayo Clinic, and at some other locations to film this TV show. And I can remember sitting down and having a heart-to-heart with my creative director, Jason, and I was like, I'm just not my best self. I mean, I'm going to show up because I have to, and I'm going to do my best, but I would cancel this if I had an option to cancel it. And here's, I think, where a really important lesson is I was so passionate about this show and this concept and doing it, and I didn't quit. I didn't stop doing it. And so we traveled to Tecate in July and filmed the segment for the TV show. And then, within a few months after the TV show had broadcast on PBS, that segment was actually nominated for an Emmy Award. And so within 1 year span, I had the most traumatic thing that could happen to me within my lifetime. And then on the other side, probably one of the brightest shining moments happened to me, within that same year.
I have to tell you something. First of all, I'm going to share with the group that I am going to post that segment that you were talking about, the spa, because it is fabulous. When I watched it, I cried. I got emotional, and I want people to understand that the purpose wasn't to make people so emotional. It had a little bit of history. It had a feel good, but there was so much emotion there that I really became, and I completely understand why that was Emmy nominated.
Thank
so
you.
Then I decided afterwards to show it to my husband, who is more logical. I am more emotional, and he's more logical. He's a programmer, and he had a stroke. And since the stroke, he also lost a lot of emotion and empathy. He became colder, he changed. So even more logic and less emotional. I said to him, I would like you to watch this short clip. And I put it for him, and I'm looking at him, and tears are streaming down his.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh.
And I said to him, are you emotional? And he's like all flux, like he doesn't know where to put himself, because this is not a place where he's comfortable going in that emotion. And he said, yes, there was something so special. I want to go to this spa.
You're gonna make me cry right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to share it with the group, but I want you to know that there is something deeper in the work. The story is incredible, the story of the spa, the woman, but there was something very real about your conversation with her that was, you felt like you were the third person around the table. I felt that I was there with, and I wanted to participate in the conversation. You did a fabulous job. So how I think that the main message for everybody is that really from ashes to such a highlight in a relatively brief period of life, when you take your entire life and you take that bad year that led to a nomination like that, I mean, what else could be a message of hope? Because there's so many people in our group that people suffered strokes, some are survivors, some are caretakers. There's a lot of people. There is women in the group that suffer domestic abuse, sexual abuse. I mean, a lot of trauma. And to see that you can go from the depths of despair to such a highlight in relatively a short period of time.
Thank you so much for you don't know, like, to put so much in. Like, first off, I held the desire to tell that particular story for 5 years at least. So to hear you share with me how it impacted you and your husband is more meaningful, honestly, than the Emmy nomination, just because that's what I hope that, some of the stories that I tell do is, make you feel like you're part of that story, or it gives you a piece of history, or, something that inspires you. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure. So tell me a little bit more about since then. This was 2016, and we are now 2020. What has been your life since? Any lingering feelings about suicide? Have you made peace? Like, tell us this last 4 years.
Yeah, so there's been a few moments that brought me a sense of peace, and I mean, I'm pretty at peace with, one, the decision my father made and his right to make that decision today. Now that we're out of the trauma state, because I think when you're in the middle of it, it's so shocking and your emotions are engaged and the guilt is activated, and you literally have to give yourself some space and some time to let yourself process, part of everything that happened. So there were a couple very specific things that helped me particularly in my journey. So one of them was, I was a writer for the Boca Raton magazine. So I was trying to find some really amazing local features. And I had been at 2 events. This was so interesting. I had been at 2 events, and this woman came up to me to introduce herself. Out of the blue, she said something about one of my past lives, like something about your past life and my purpose in this life. And then I was at a different event and somebody else started talking about a past life. And I was like, I pay attention to that kind of stuff. So I found a local hypnotherapist, and I went into her and I said, I would like to do an article on past life and hypnotherapy. I didn't know this would have anything to do with my dad. And so we proceeded to, actually I interviewed her, and then I went under for a session. And so usually in hypnotherapy, they have you kind of walk through, they're trying to get you to settle down and get into your, out of your sympathetic nervous system and into a relaxed state. And so she said, I want you to envision that you're walking on a beach. And, so she was like taking me through this sort of guided visualization. And then she goes, now I want you to see somebody approaching you on the beach, somebody that you want to have a conversation with. And so immediately an image of my father showed up in my visualization piece. But here's what was interesting. I have a perception of what my father looks like. He was sickly. He had a long gray beard. He had gray hair. He was a double amputee. So he was a feeble, older senior. But when I was visualizing him on the beach, he was bigger than life and youthful. And he had like all this exuberant energy. And it was like a younger version of himself had come to join me on the beach. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know my father in that capacity. And we just started to have a conversation. And again, he was telling me that, it was his right to make a choice and that he had made the choice and that I should not hold any guilt or, any sort of sense of obligation around his decision, that it was his choice to make that. And he had made that choice. And then she said, is there anything you would want to ask your father, any piece of advice? And so I said, hey, Dad, I have these big decisions. And he was like, he told me, he looked right at me. I'll never forget this. Me and my father in my visualization. He said, you just need to trust your gut. You're on point. You have the right instincts. You have the right intuition. Don't question yourself. Make the decisions that you need to make. And he was giving me like this advice that made sense to me. And so now, she brought me out of that state. But now when I think about my dad, I remember that dad more than I remember the feeble, double amputee, mid-80s father. I remember the youthful, exuberant, high energy, positive dad. And so for me, hypnotherapy was actually a very good experience for me. And it helped to shift my perception from sadness to happiness, because he was such an exuberant spirit in that experience that's what I feel like he is now. I don't feel like he's a feeble, sad, person.
This is very interesting because so much of what we live is stories that we tell ourselves that's in our minds, right? It's how we remember. It's the vantage point that we have of an event. But then when we can shift that vantage point, if we can shift the story, then we can change the future. This is actually something that I do write in my book, that it is when you see things from a different perspective, but really see it from a different perspective, you change the story. And if you change the story that you retell yourself, then you can start changing the future, because everything is based on its building blocks. But if we can retell a different story, so now your story is that strong, younger father who is motivating you to go forward. It's a good memory.
Yeah.
So,
and that's who I feel is like with me, so when I think about, I feel like, I've got my biggest cheerleader is there, and it's my dad, who couldn't be that way necessarily in life, but he's that way now. So even when I think of him or I envision him, he's like, get it, girl, get it, girl. That's like the energy that I sense around him, which to me has brought me so much like peace and relinquishing some of the pain that comes around making a decision like that because of who I envision that he is now.
Fabulous. So since then you started the TV, right? Since then so tell us about it. You left because before you were creating for the channels, the TV channels.
Yes.
And now you're creating something because you have a mission that you want to accomplish. So if something doesn't exist, you make it happen.
Right. Exactly. I was actually recording I had put together like a PowerPoint, and I was doing like a voiceover on the PowerPoint. So I was telling kind of the backstory on it. But it's exactly that. I was like, oh, this kind of thing doesn't exist. I guess I'll go create it.
I could do the ad for you. Here is
exactly. You're like,
my beloved Catherine is here. Hi, Catherine. We do have a question, but I'll come back to that question in a second, because I just want you to finish the thought process. So you're creating it. I love it, because that's my attitude also. If something that I want doesn't exist, you make it happen. Exactly. So tell us a little bit about the channel, because you created, TV is no longer what it used to be. People used to turn on the TV. Now people turn on the computers. So tell us about it.
Well, so what I figured out, because I produced 3 traditional television shows. So I had The Journey into Wellbeing, Senior Moments, which we talked about, and then I did one in 2019 called The Primetime. And so what I figured out was a couple really critical things. Doing that takes a lot of work. It's very expensive, and it's very time consuming. And the odds of getting discovered by a network are slim to none. So in the past, my nickname has been Bulldozer, because people know that I will just keep bulldozing until I get stuff done. So I just have that personality type. But what happened was, let's say I was creating Senior Moments. I only had 4 segments. That was a 30-minute show. And so I could only feature 4 stories, but there were 100 that I wanted to feature. I just couldn't do it. And I was only producing a show once every few years. So I was like, I want to get, this educational and inspirational content out in a way that actually has the potential to change the world. And I'm going to be in my mid-90s before I actually produce enough of these TV shows to make any kind of significance. So what are the barriers? How do I help people like me who want to share their message in a bigger way? How do I help them be successful in that? And so the concept for a new kind of non-traditional network started to land in my brain at the end of 2018. And I was like, okay, so what are the barriers? The barriers are cost, time, knowledge, how to do it, and also being picked up. So what if there were literally almost no barriers, and if somebody held the desire, like a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, or a massage therapist, or a entrepreneurial coach, if they hold that desire to share their positive message in a bigger way, what can I do to support them in that? And so the concept for an online television network started, and we're surrounding it with educational resources, but also the distribution aspect, so that if somebody wants to create content, just like we're doing here, this is great content. How do we get this out and get it in front of people in a bigger way? And so that's really what I'm in the middle of creating. Is the platform is wellworld.tv. You can go there. Our brand new website just launched, just so you can see an early peek at it and some of the people that I'm naturally attracting to come and create content and share it.
It's fantastic. And actually, our next week's speaker is one.
Laura, I saw that.
Laura is coming. One of our hosts. Yes, because the next 3 or 4 interviews that I have will include writing from the soul, writing for healing.
She's perfect for that.
Isn't she? Yeah,
yes.
I thought so. So she's opening, and then we're going to have the week after that, me plus another 3 women whom I interviewed, all of them for my Kintsugi blog. They're all my Kintsugi ladies who have written books.
Nice.
We're going to talk about, writing for healing, like how the process of writing was helpful to our healing journey. I want to go back here because one of our viewers asked a question. She wants to know how you're handling COVID and the isolation it has caused to many of us. Are you doing well emotionally now?
Well, it's so funny because I'm an extrovert. The Myers-Briggs, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Myers-Briggs, but I'm an ENTP. So I'm an extroverted, intuitive, thinking personality. And I feel like I'm an extrovert in rehab. So, pre-COVID, I was out, shaking hands, going to events. I couldn't even work from my home. I had to go to Starbucks every day. And I was out. I was a person of the world. I was just out in the world. And so I can remember my very last meeting pre-COVID, which was mid-March. And I just sequestered myself at home. So the good part is, as long as I have my laptop and my cell phone, I can work anywhere. The challenge has been definitely just, limiting my ability to go out and get that energy from being out and around people. So my saving grace has literally been the ocean, because I live a mile from the beach, 5 days a week, 4 miles every time. I am trekking to the ocean. I'm jumping in if the water looks good. I'm snorkeling, I'm swimming, I'm getting out, and I'm moving my body. And then, I do still I've been so busy during the pandemic and on Zoom and doing interviews and helping hosts get their content going. So I still have been very, very productive. But, in full transparency, there's been days I haven't got out of the bed. I was like, I will lay in bed for half a day saying, you've got all these things you need to do, but I just don't have it in me today. I think it's impacted a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And, there's been moments where I just hung out and watched Netflix. It's like, that's just part of the deal.
So it's so interesting, because you are an extrovert, and believe it or not, I'm an introvert. And I love it.
I was like, the introverts are like, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, now I cannot see people in person.
So I feel lucky that we got to meet.
Yes, and we did meet in person. It was the only time I really left to meet somebody. But it's funny, I can do a group, I can do some Zooms, but in person, to like live, going to events, that's not my thing at all. So it's interesting. I think that introverts are having, an easier time, even though I'm getting tired. I think I'm getting tired of this limitation of not knowing when it's going to end, I'm tired of hearing the sad stories and not being able to do anything for the people who are suffering. I'm tired of the discord, how people, because they don't agree, they attack each other, or they see, this bothers me so much, because people can have different opinions, people can have different backgrounds, different beliefs. You even asked me, can I talk about the hypnotherapy? And I'm like, yes, or a psychic or something like that. I am very open, because I think that, there's different caps to different pots. It's okay. There's all types, and we should all just support each other and, help each other during different times that for some are easier, for some are harder, for some don't believe, some believe too much. It doesn't matter. We're all in this together and being affected somehow.
Well, I think that energy you're describing, because I started to get kind of a picture when you're saying that, is a lot of times we put our energy like laterally, and that's the day-to-day sort of stuff. But if we're able to like elevate our gaze and we're really focused on something bigger than ourselves, a sense of purpose, a sense of contribution, a sense of something bigger, it really almost diminishes that need to be petty and respond to the moment and, criticize somebody for being different. Because if our focus is on something bigger, which I feel like with Well World TV, I have a focus. My focus is to help content creators get their message out in a bigger way. I don't really have time for that stuff. So my thought would be, when you find yourself drawn into that sort of day-to-day jibber jabber, put your focus, what is the big thing that you're focused on, and keep your eyes elevated there.
That's right. So let me see some more comments. I had a former student who was in my 3rd, 4th grade class who committed suicide. She was 17 years old. She had been sexually abused by her father for many years. None of us teachers ever suspected abuse. And that is the problem. And this is why shows like this are important. And that's why it's also important to bring people and convince people to come hear it. Because you see, people usually are attracted to the messages that they already believe in.
Mm.
I bet with you that all the people who are here believe in everything that we're saying. What we have a hard time is going out of our comfort zone to listen to something that we don't naturally believe. But if we were exposed to it, we could learn and figure out and be able to see. That's why when I asked these questions about suicide, I was lucky that I did not have anybody in my personal life, my close life that I know that committed suicide. So I don't know anything about it. So when I'm talking to you, you're teaching me. I am growing in my wisdom, and maybe I'll be able to notice and see signs in the future that otherwise I wouldn't have known. So it's important to bring people to come to these events so they can also learn from the experience that, our guests are sharing. See here, most children will not tell often.
Yeah.
That's,
that's to me, that's very tragic, because I think, like, I always tell people, like, if you're an adult, let's say you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, and you're still blaming your parents, for situations and things that happened to you as a child, I always have this perception that, we were under our parents' control from birth to 18, but from 18 to however old we are, we're responsible for our life choices. And so if I'm 50 or 60 and I'm still really angry and mad at my parents, I've had longer to get myself straight than they had time to kind of mess me up, so to speak. But when somebody is as children, we don't have a choice. Like, we're born into the life that we're born in and literally do the best that we can to survive. And it's very sad that, she felt like her only choice was to take her life at 17, because her life could have shifted in adulthood, and things could have unraveled for her differently. But to me, that's the most traumatic period, is when you're a child and you don't have any control over who your parents are or your neighbors are, and some of the decisions that they're making as adults that really traumatize you.
Yeah, let's read some of that. Yeah, we can learn from anybody. Everybody is a teacher, as long as we're willing to be the students, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Salute.
Statistics are, obviously this is a whole different show, but, I had sexual abuse in my childhood too, between the ages of 8 and 12. And, it's just one of those things that I was a child, and it's like you don't have any control over what the parents or the adults, what decisions they're making in your life when you're a child. And, the best that you can do is in adulthood is try to make peace with your past so that it doesn't continue to fester in your present. And, I don't have all the answers to that.
And look at that. Kathy, she was molested as a child. We don't tell because of the shame and humiliation. The uncomfortable conversation of discussing sexual abuse helps open the option to break up the silence. Let me see if I have here. Look, this is her book, Kathy's book. Kathy, look at this.
You've got a picture. That's the beautiful picture of your symbol.
Yes. When she was introduced to me, I interviewed April, who's also an author. She's going to be in that group. And April introduced me to Kathy because when she saw my clothing with the kintsugi, and she knew Kathy, and she had seen her book cover, so she connected the two of us. And I interviewed Kathy, and actually I mentioned Kathy a lot in my book because Kathy is like such an example of somebody who is kintsugi, because she really put the pieces together. I always say that a thriver uses her message, uses whatever happened to her, whatever broke her, to make the world a better place, to help people. And Kathy is like, she's a public speaker and she's an author. In her career, she's a hair designer. So, she chose to really step up and take her story Yes, our past don't define us, and she's amazing. Kathy, um, look at that.
Yeah.
I grew up
I mean, look
thinking
at
that
just
sex was love. So
look within this
I
group,
think
how many
we will have.
people have suffered from sexual abuse. I mean, it's almost mind-boggling how common it is and how much shame that somebody feels in it. And there is a lot of power for what you're doing, which is allowing these type of conversations to not normalize it or make it okay, but to be able to unfester the wound a little bit by just sharing it.
Yeah, and not only that, like end the stigma. Victims are not people that have any blame, and the ones who manage to survive and then thrive, they're the real heroes that need to be celebrated instead of, silliness that people are celebrating. These are the stories that need to be celebrated and talked about. So I want to invite anybody who has any questions. I think that this is the time that if you have a question, type it in so we can answer. I want to to remind the group, because a lot of people are listening now. Some people are going to listen to it later. That the idea of the group is to bring stories of resilience and hope. The focus is not to make it into a soap opera. It's not to go into somebody's life and watch the time that their life was a mess and just watch it from outside. It's really to understand, learn, and see hope, and see that there is growth from the break, that there is transformation to be made. Salud is saying, I believe that's why I have the passion to help make the world a better world by helping in any way I can. And Salud does it. Salud comes to every show. She promotes everybody's shows. Her husband had a stroke. She's an amazing caretaker, and she's present. I'm a thriver, not a victim, by the way.
Yes.
100%. Salud is a true warrior, 100%. And I actually talk in my book that we all we are a victim at some point. Some people stay in victim mode. Others thrive, right? They go through a transformation. They first survive, then they thrive. Some become warriors, But, the real idea is how to go from victimhood to being a thriver. You are a thriver. And I want to bring people to this group that are thriving despite whatever it is that they went through. Maybe because of what they went through, they became the person that they are. So I'm so happy that you're here and that you shared your story with us. I don't take it for granted. It's hard to talk about the past. Sometimes I finish those conversations and then I speak to the guest, and it's hard. It takes a toll on themselves. It takes a toll on me, and because as an empath, it's hard to go through relive a story. But we have to end in that good note. We have to always remember, look, there was an Emmy. Look, there was a vision of the father, young, who's cheering you on, who's there for you. I mean, life is something so fascinating, and we have to hold on to those incredible messages and moments that are so special. Let's see that is what I was just thinking. This is why I care for people, because I never was. Well, Naomi, we love you. We care about you, and we're just so happy that you are here with us. And everybody else in this group, I ask you to share. Please share. Now that you watched it, the group is private. The reason the group is private is because we do have some conversations in the group that we don't want to have it out in the open. I want to create a space that if people have a question that they want to, just ask within us women, they have this place. But this live this broadcast is happening also on my YouTube channel, and it's also happening in my personal page. So you can go there, take the link, and share it with your friends. If every single one that was here today, and whoever is going to be watching on replay, if you share it, you may be helping somebody. You may help somebody that really needed to hear this message of hope. If they had a case of suicide in their family and they can see Debra, how she's thriving, how she's creating, how she got an Emmy after all of this difficult period. I mean, this could be, the saving grace for somebody who's really depressed. So I ask you to please share. Yes, I read that. Positive mental attitude, 100%. Your husband is watching with me. That's very good. And it's my pleasure. Debra, do you have anything else to end with?
No, I was just going to say that, I'm in my 50s now, so I've been around the moon a few times to be enough to be seasoned. But, in hindsight, when I reflect back on life, when you talk about thriving, sometimes it is those moments when our knees are on the ground and our face is in the mud and we feel like we've been kicked, that sometimes the most beautiful thing comes from that. Because when we're in that uncomfortable space, and there's this quote that says, where the cracks are is where the light comes in. And so now, at my age, when I start to come into those uncomfortable, more painful moments, there's almost a little bit of excitement that I'm going to see something different. I'm going to experience something better. I'm going to have a breakthrough. I'm going to be different. And so I think there's something really powerful about, having traveled around the moon a few times, had my knees in the ground and my face in the grit, to know that something brilliant is right around the corner.
100%. I want to remind everybody that my book, I'm having a promotion now. Until my book is live on Amazon, I'm donating 1 for 1. If you buy a book, we're donating 1 book to a woman in need. I'm not making a penny. Actually, it's not even covering my cost. But this was my birthday present to myself, was to feel, yes, the book is going to do good, but I wanted to do even more good. So if you're interested in this quote that Debra just said, Leonard Cohen's quote, is in my book. Yay. So if you want to read it, go to healwithgold.com/book. You can purchase 1 or multiples and give it away as gifts. Regardless, as many as you buy, we will donate 1 to a woman in need through a nonprofit organization. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Please share. I love you all. And thank you so much, Debra.
Thank you so much.